Hi everyone, it's Nicole here for Honeybee Stamps with a Snow Buddies Mason Jar card. This is a shaped card with a acetate overlay to make it look like a snow globe shaker, even though there's no shaker to this at all. So it's going to be fairly flat still and go in an envelope really nicely, but I love the illusion of an overlay, and we're even going to finish the inside of the card with some additional stamping of sentiments. Let's start with the components of the mason jar card. I have die cut the base from white cardstock, two of the jar toppers from a black mirror cardstock. This is from Tonic Studios. This is a velvet, so it's kind of a nice flat. And then I die cut just a portion of the mason jar again from smooth white cardstock, and then used one of the Honeybee Hill borders to create that snow border we're going to place along the bottom edge of the jar design. I like to use the die that I'm using as the base and then die cut my border from that so it fits perfectly instead of trying to just trim it into that shape. We're going to add some color to our mason jar front first with Mermaid Lagoon and Chipped Sapphire Distress inks. This is going to create the contrast of the snow globe type of look so that it looks like this dark background that's going to set off the snowman and gift packages and everything really nicely. Where there's so much white going on in this card, I felt like I needed a nice contrast for our little snow globe mason jar, and these colors are going to provide that. Because I die cut this from smooth white cardstock, I'm going to have to work a little bit harder with my distress inks to get a seamless blend. I like to start with the light ink first, then go with the dark ink over that and blend back with the light ink again. Here's our snowy border. When you are inking and you are inking your card base, definitely, I always like to keep my work surface clean. So I try to remember to wipe it clean so that I don't take my card and accidentally rub it into that ink on my glass work surface, because that's going to transfer the ink to the card, and I don't want the back of the ink to be all inked up with ink smears. So I've adhered my snow border along the bottom edge of the card. Go ahead and move some of this stuff out of the way now. And I'm thinking I want to use sentiments from the Jingle All The Way stamp set. Originally, when I started this card, I did not think I would use a acetate overlay. I had been trying to think of all kinds of ways to give me that snow globe illusion without actually creating a snow globe. So I decided to set that aside for a minute while I stamped the images from Snow Buddies onto a scrap of smooth white cardstock here. And the acetate overlay is really going to be the best way, I think, to add not only that snow globe effect and feel, but it's going to provide a place where I can stamp a sentiment or a phrase there on the front that won't overlap my images. And you'll see what I mean about that here in a little bit. So I'm kind of grabbing up all the images I am wanting for my card. I originally did not stamp the scarf or the third present, so I will be going back and doing that later. That's one of those things where I guessed what I needed, but I didn't really account for extra space. I felt after I had the snowman colored and die cut, I felt like he needed a little something else. So a scarf's going to come in handy. And I like threes in my embellishments, so I went ahead and stamped an additional gift package as well. The snowman arms are not stamped in black. I know it's a little hard to see here, but in the finished card, especially once that ink has dried, you can notice the difference. Those were stamped with a brown ink because that's a solid image, and I felt like brown would work better for the snowman arms. Then I am adding just a touch of color to my snowman with blue-green 0000 and blue-green 01. And then I'm taking a colorless blender and blending out those harsh lines around the edges. This is just giving a hint of color to my snowman so he's not so harsh white. A little R00 for his cute little cheek, and then YR04 and 09 for his nose. We're going to be adding quite a lot of detail to our snowman before we tuck him underneath the acetate layer, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. For any of the red areas on the card, including the hat, scarf, packages, and even the bird, I'm using our 37, 39, and 89. This is kind of a deeper, darker, more rich red color combination that I really have been loving this season. I love how it sets off the beautiful blue background especially. E55 and 57 for the snowman's broom. Little red around where it's holding the broom together. And then my green color combination is G82, 46, and 29. Very much like the red color combination, this is a deeper, richer green, not a bright green. I have been playing around with different green color combinations that work really nice, I think, for holiday and even beyond. And this is one that I really, really love. For the gifts, I decided not to go crazy and pull in lots of different colors. They're more of a supporting cast of embellishments, if you will. So I kept to red and green for all three, and I'm just going to alternate. So if the package is green, the bow is red. If the package is red, the bow is going to be green. And I'll do that for all three of the images that I'm using for my card here today. Honeybee really does some amazing shaped cards, which I think are very fun. I did not make this one into a gift card holder, but you could very easily do that with dies from Honeybee. There's a little gift pocket die that would be great. There's some other dies that make gift card slots. You could die cut those elements and tuck them inside your card. So if you want to make this into a gift card holder, that is a possibility and would be super easy. And it would be hidden within the card because this is a nice substantial sized shaped card. If you love shaped cards, this is just another fantastic option for you. Honeybee does some of the absolute best that I have seen as far as size and scale. I love them. I love that all the components come in the die set. There's even more dies in this mason jar card. So if you want to create other styles of cards, you could do that easily. I'm making this into a holiday themed card, but you definitely wouldn't have to. It would work for many occasions. The white part on my card, I'm adding a hint of color to. However, a lot of this is going to be covered with a chunky glitter, something else I've really been loving this season. So I'm using Warm Gray 3, 1, and 00 to add just a touch of color to the areas that are going to be white on my hat. But again, if you don't want to, you wouldn't have to add that if you're going to cover it up with glitter like I'm going to be doing. But any of the areas around the edges that maybe don't get covered with the glitter, I always like to just have that nice little base there. And then coloring in my bird, I left the belly of the bird so I could add my warm grays to that. I'll take some wire snips, trim apart my Snow Buddies dies, and then die cut these. Another thing is Honeybee does a great job of providing dies for all of the shapes. This is a 6x8 stamp set, Snow Buddies is, and it is full of images. I am using only a fraction of what you get in this, so I will trim these apart and then die cut all of the elements for my card. You can even customize your snowman with buttons down the front. There's a couple of different options there. There's lots of different birds. You could even add in bunnies if you don't want to do gift packages or as many gift packages. There's lots of hats. earmuffs, different branches for arms. Some of the branches are holding ornaments. There's some less decorative branches. I use some that are a little bit fuller, but there's some that are a little bit more simple in design. There's a bow. You could even do it as a bow around the neck or a bow on the head, depending on what you want to create there. Lots and lots of images in this stamp set. It's one of my very, very favorite from the Dearly Loved release. I absolutely love it. This is a 5x7 piece of acetate that I cut, and you can see it will only cut a portion. It's not going to be as big, and that's okay. We don't need the acetate on the back of this. Now I wanted to leave this part of the a little mistake in and show you how I fixed it without ruining the acetate. I should have taken this off and stamped it because any of those die cut pieces underneath are causing it not to stamp in a very crisp image. I'm using that snow image from the Jingle All The Way stamp set, and it's not stamping well. If you take a little Stazon cleaner, in fact, I don't even think this was Stazon, this was just regular stamp ultra clean cleaner, and a paper towel or a rag, you can take that directly to the acetate and wipe that Stazon ink away. Remember, if you're using acetate, it's not a porous surface, and you're going to have to use a Stazon ink if you want it to ever dry. I'm using that falling snow image kind of around the top and then the edges. I don't want to go too far down. While I want it to cover up some of the image, I don't want it to completely distort it. So just kind of, it looks a little bit messy, but layered over the top, I think it turned out really awesome. So we're also going to take the Let It Snow sentiment, which is a huge sentiment. If I wanted to create this without the acetate overlay, there's really nowhere for it on the front of my card. I would need to choose something smaller or leave the front of the card plain, which you definitely could do. But I decided to go ahead and stamp the Let It Snow kind of off to the right, so it's not completely covering the snowman's face, and then layer it over top of my mason jar. And I love the way this turned out. So we're going to have the acetate overlay over just the front of the card, and it does bend over the front, so I'm going to secure that with adhesive where it's going to be hidden underneath our next die cut layer, which is the top of the jar. So we're securing that on the back side and the front, and there is what the overlay looks like. I'm going to go ahead and add the embellishing to my snowman now with black glaze pen for the eyes, glossy accents for the nose. I'm using a pair of tweezers to help hold my images while I am embellishing. So for example, the Santa hat, I am going to put a liquid adhesive. In this case, I think I just used glossy accents, but you could use whatever liquid adhesive you like. And I'm going to apply that to the brim and the pom-pom of his Santa hat, and then sprinkle on some chunky glitter. And I'm using a coffee filter to catch my extra glitter here. It's off to the side. And I'll use a little liquid glue to attach my hat to the snowman. And again, I like to use my tweezers to hold pieces together. So I will be doing that a lot throughout. When I go to attach his branch arms, I attached his scarf to his neck there. I'm going to take a black glaze pen and add detail to the bird's eye as well. Add some little white dots to the belly. And then I want to take my white pen and add a stripe to the scarf. If you guys have seen my videos before, I tend to like to decorate the scarves with a white pen a lot. I think it adds a really fun touch and customizes the design. And some little white dots for his cheek. And his eyes too, I think it makes his eyes really come to life. So there's kind of what he's going to look like. I need to wait for the glue to completely dry before I place him underneath that acetate layer. So do keep that in mind when you're working on something that does have an acetate layer like this. You will most likely want to let this sit completely dry. I let mine sit for probably an hour or two, maybe not even that long, an hour and a half. And then I came back and popped it in place. You could also wait to attach that acetate layer until you have completely assembled your scene. I think I was anxious to see how my snow globe was going to look, and so I went ahead and attached it. I also added some little touches of glue along the edges of my snowman. And this time I'm using PRISMA glitter, which is a more fine glitter, to add what I like to call a dusting of snow. So it just gives the illusion that the snowman has been touched with snow. It gives it a little bit more of that frosty, fun look. I'm going to put adhesive on the back of the jar toppers now. I love this velvet cardstock. And we're going to place this on the front and the back. It's going to give the front and the back a very finished look. You could place it just on the front if you wanted to. However, I've got that acetate overlay, so it's kind of disguising that as well. But I also like that it just gives it a finished design rather than just on the front of the card. We're attaching the snowman branches. This is where my tweezers come in handy. It's just going to pinch that shut and hold it in place. I've got both of my arms attached now. The glue is completely dry. This is satin dried for a little bit. I went and did something else for a while, came back to this, and then we're going to glue the rest of the scene in place. So we've got the snowman, the broom. Look how awesome the overlay looks. I like how it really kind of gives more of that illusion of falling snow. I'm a huge fan of an acetate layer for this very reason. Then we're going to tuck the gift packages, a couple over there on the left and one over on the right. And then the bird, I originally had planned to stick him up on top of the broomstick, but I felt like he got covered up too much. So then I played around with some different options, trying to figure out where he looks best. And I ended up sticking him down below. I kept trying to put him up there, and I just felt like he got lost in the snow, and it's just didn't really work for me. So I'm going to tuck him down there, and I think that's cute. Use my bone folder to help score this a little bit better now. And that is really about it for the front of the card. We are going to take a little red and white baker's twine and wrap it around the top. I think that adds a festive touch to the top of the card. So we're going to wrap that around about 3 times. And then tie it into a bow. And I kind of fiddled and fussed with this a little bit, trying to get it exactly the way I want. But I wrap it around 3 times, take one of those ends underneath all 3 strands, and that's going to pull them all together and then tie them into a bow over there on the right side of the card. And I'm going to leave the tails a little bit longer so they dangle down. You could also, if you have a small tag, you could tie a little tag to this. I think that would be sweet too, as long as it's not too big. That would be a fun little effect. And maybe do a little to from or something like that would be really, really cute. Especially if maybe you're doing a gift card inside of this. And that adds a nice touch of color up at the top of the card that ties into all of the red that we used for coloring in the images. Finally, we want to finish off the inside of the card. So I am going to use my Misty And I'm going to use sentiments from the Jingle All The Way stamp set, which is what we used for the Let It Snow on the acetate overlay. And I'm masking off parts of the Dashing Through the Snow sentiment. It's awfully long, so I'm stamping through the snow with black ink. We're going to clean the stamp really well, and then we're going to mask off the rest of the sentiment, lining up the word dashing, centering it there, and just stamp the word dashing above this. And then underneath, we're going to use the to say phrase. So it's going to read dashing through the snow to say hello. So while this is a holiday-ish themed card and it can be used for holiday, it could also be used through the holiday season if you just want to send a hello card to someone. The majority of my sentiment is stamped with black ink. When we get to the scripty word hello from the sentiment that we're going to use next, I'm going to use the Mermaid Lagoon and Chipped Sapphire Distress inks that I used for inking the background on the front of the card. And I'm going to do something I really like, which is an ombre effect for a script sentiment. It really showcases it beautifully. You really will need a stamp positioner of some sort for this technique if you're using these inks. Pigment inks, you might not have to, but I'm using the regular distress inks and I'm inking them up with both colors of ink to start with. So the Mermaid Lagoon on the top and the Chipped Sapphire along the bottom, but you can see that you don't get a perfect stamped image. So this is where the stamp positioner comes in handy. You can ink up your stamp as many times as you need to and stamp that for a beautiful crisp stamped image. So there is the stamped sentiment on the inside of the card that finishes off this mason jar shaped card featuring the Snow Buddies stamp set perfectly. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this shaped holiday themed card. The supplies I used to create this card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Here are a couple more videos featuring honeybee stamps you might be interested in. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.